Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Reawakened Mom podcast. And I am here today with Kristin Lindell. How are you, Kristin?
Doing very well. Melissa, thanks for asking. I'm very happy to be here with you all as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And so you might recognize Kristin's name because she was on a little quick episode when we did the summit back in February. But I knew I had to have her come back to do a full episode to talk about all the things that she does, all the ways that she helps and supports stepmoms, because I myself am a stepmom, and I knew that it would be really, really powerful for all of us to have a little more time with her. So if you didn't go back, make sure you listen to that episode. I'll link it in the show notes as well. But let me just remind you who Kristin is. She is a certified life coach for stepmoms, and she's a stepmom and a mom to 5 kids. So she's got a bunch of them. She knows what's going on. She uses conversational hypnosis, neurolinguistics, if I can talk, and other evidence-based modalities to help stepmoms get relief from feeling resentful and cut their heated fights in half. Oh boy, that sounds juicy.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. Before we dive into all of that, because that will definitely take up 40, 45 minutes, 30 minutes. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us where you are. Tell us about your family, a little bit about you.
Of course. Yeah. So I am currently based in San Diego. And I met my husband actually when we were both working in Washington, D.C. So he's a physician in the Navy. And we met, that's where we met, that's where we got engaged. And, that's how I had come to meet his kiddos who were living in San Diego at the time.
Okay.
And so we relocated here for his job in the military, I guess about 4 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago at this point. And now we, are splitting custody 50-50. So it's week on, week off with the kids. And we also have our own little baby who's about to turn 18 months here in a couple of weeks. So
okay, so
yeah.
you jumped in and you jumped into a life where you had 4 kids automatically. Is that correct? Am I doing the math correctly?
Yeah, you're doing the math correctly. Yes, 1 minus 5 is 4. Yeah, so I became sort of an instant parent figure to 4 kids who at the time I think were between the ages of 4 and maybe 9. So they were all still like relatively, on the young side. But yeah, it was definitely a lot for sure.
What were you doing before you started doing this? Or were you coaching stepmoms when you became a stepmom? Or did that start after? I'm assuming it started after, but I really don't know.
Yeah. So before I got into coaching, I actually worked in the humanitarian aid, like international development sector. I was working as a contractor for the branch of the government that does that type of work. But my role was always primarily to be managing people, like to help other people do their jobs really well.
Yeah.
So I've always kind of played that role in whatever position that I was in, whether it's through mentorship or, training or managing. So I'd always been more oriented towards the people side of things. And then I decided, because I knew that my husband's career was probably going to take us to San Diego. And I said, I want to do something where I can do it from anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Which is funny because now a lot more jobs you could do from anywhere. Right. But this is pre-COVID, people.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was like, I want to just have something that I can do from anywhere. And I love working with people. And I had always been interested in coaching. Like, I think I had done an internship somewhere where the HR person was also a coach. And it just, it was very fascinating to me to watch how she interacted with her people and her direct reports and the trainings that she did. So it's something I always wanted to do. So I got my certification and then basically decided, who do I want to help? And I don't think I hadn't, maybe we had gotten married by that point. It's hard to remember because it's like, it's all squished together at this point, right? But I think it was when I just became a stepmom, I was like, I think there is a need for more support in this area, because I know even before we got married, there was a lot of changes to deal with, a lot of things that were difficult to adjust to. And I just found a lot of the like resources that were available to me at the time to fall pretty short, and sort of give a very like, it felt like the messaging was very, I don't know what the word is, just like unrealistic
Yeah.
and sort of depressing.
Hmm.
Um, and so I wanted to provide something that was more empowering to
Yeah.
people. And that, that's where sort of the coaching side of things comes in.
Yeah, I love that because so when I met my husband in 2001,
Hmm.
my stepson, his name's Slater, so he was 9 at the time. So right now he's
Yeah.
30. So, but I mean, you don't really understand or know anyway. Like when you get married and you have kids, like, yeah, there's no rule book, but there's
Right.
really you have no idea when you're a stepmom because there's so many pieces to it and other people and a whole nother household, and where it's like, wait a second, like where's my role, because I'm not your mom, but like I'm the mom in this, like there's so
Right.
many different feelings of how you adjust. Like, how am I supposed to act? I don't want to overstep someone else's bound. Like, there were all these feelings that were going on in my head. So I wish that you were around back in the day when I first became a stepmom, because it's very hard. It's very confusing. There's a lot
Yeah.
of emotions that go on. So kind of tell me what you do. Like, how do you help moms, like stepmoms, cut fights in half? Because
Yeah.
is it cutting fights in half with kids and then your spouse, or is it both? Or you can just talk about both if you do both.
Yeah. Well, the principles are the same for both. Obviously, the way that we relate to our spouses is going to be
Yeah.
different than the kids,
Yeah.
but so there's essentially two pieces to learning how to communicate like with more power and more influence, and actually, increase the likelihood of listening and maybe even real compromise, right? So the first piece is learning what emotional state are going to help you get what you want in a conversation.
Okay.
Okay.
What do you mean by
So,
that?
so what that means is like if I'm super angry, right? There's nothing wrong with being angry, right? And I say this all the time. We never want to shame our feelings. They're all normal, they're all acceptable, even that resentment, even that dread. But if I'm feeling that way, and I go and have a conversation while I'm feeling this way on the inside, that is much more likely, for example, to instigate my spouse's defenses or instigate my, stepkids' defenses, right? So it's fine. Like everyone has a right to be angry, right? For
Yeah.
example. But then I essentially teach my people, when they are ready, simple mind body exercises that they can do to quickly release that anger when they're ready to go and have a conversation, right? So that they can be calm and grounded, right? And the reason this is always the first step is because we are trained as human beings, not trained, but like we're wired to read other people's emotional states, and our nervous system at like an unconscious level is going to either put up our defenses, like put up our wall, or open up depending on how the other person approaches us. Okay. So this is really super important. So if
Yeah.
I'm coming, I always tell my people, like, if I come, at my husband, like with a metaphorical knife, he's going to want to pull out, his shield.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
if I come with an olive branch, he's going to be more open and receptive to whatever it is I have to say. And I would say that piece, like, calibrating your emotions, leveraging them, right? Knowing which ones are going to be most beneficial to you to have a challenging conversation is the most important thing, even more so than like the words that we say. Okay. So that's step one,
Okay.
is basically learning how to release and process some of these feelings in order to show up calmly to a conversation. And
Okay.
then step two, right? When you combine that with certain language, that's also going to increase the chances that there's not a fight, there's not a heated conversation. So I have lots of different scripts that I teach my people. Some of the key principles that I talk about, like if I want to have a conversation with my husband, for example, about the rules at our home when it comes to like his kiddos. Um, and this is not true, but I know a lot of people experience this in their
Yeah.
homes, is that their spouse is super sensitive to like any sort of what could be perceived as criticism about the way that like he or she is parenting the kiddos, right? So if I know that going in, if I know that my spouse is likely to get defensive, I might say something like, I noticed the other night, neither one of us enforced the screen time rules that we had talked about. I'm probably wrong about this, but I'm making that mean that this rule maybe isn't important to you. Like, tell me how I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm saying what I need to say, but also not focused on being right. Okay. So that's like a very key principle, is that when we're in a conversation, if we don't want to fight with somebody, it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about understanding the other person.
Mm-hmm. So
Okay.
is it almost like a feel, felt, found? Is it kind of something like that? Like,
I have not heard that, but it could be.
okay. Yeah. Well, it's like, this is like, this is how I feel. This is what I
Yeah,
found. This is what, like you're saying, feeling, and then this is what, I felt, and then this is what I found. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it seems very similar, because you're not like pointing the finger, like this is what you did,
exactly.
but
Yeah.
which I can see where I've done that many times.
We all have. Right. And it's not to say you can't like bring that up, but, you know, when we're in a conversation, like we want to be on the same team as our spouse. We want
Yeah.
to communicate that. Right. So it doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong. Right. So when like I talk about with my clients, like our fighting hat versus our cooperative hat. And when we're in a cooperative state, we're talking about nuance, right? Things aren't black and white. Like there's room for both of us to be wrong in our
Yeah.
assumptions here, right? I talk about the idea of us, right? We're focused on us as a team and not just like me or not just you, right? We're focused on us. We're using specific examples, right? So we want to talk about very, very specific incidences. And then we use I statements to take responsibility for our feelings. So there's no blame involved, right? Versus the fighting hat, which is like, it's very much, if got my fighting hat on, I'm very much focused on me. I'm focused on being right. I am focused on generalizations over specific things. I am prone to give ultimatums, right? Which everybody hates. Nobody wants an ultimatum. Okay. So that's another kind of way to sort of look at that and approach that. Right. But again, it all stems from this idea that we're a couple, we're a team, we're seeking to understand each other, not to like get our way, right?
Yeah.
Or not to prove ourselves right. Because when somebody's right in a marriage, someone else always loses.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. Like, I love that. I love the two different
Yeah.
hats too. That's such a great
Right.
visual kind of representation of thinking, oh, wait, like which hat do I have on right now? Am I coming at this like
Mm-hmm.
gloves on? Like I'm ready to
Yeah,
duke it out till the ninth, or like,
exactly.
yeah, or is it like, hey, like we're on the same team here, like pickleball here, we're together here, like we're a team.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Like it's us against this challenge versus me versus you.
Yeah. Wow. Which I know like that was a lot of issues, like, when not as much now, but like when my stepson, when he was growing up, because there was like a separate household. So it was almost, I know we talked about before about transitions and how that's such a hard time for us
Mm-hmm.
as stepmoms, like when maybe the kids are leaving or maybe when they're coming back, because a lot
Yeah.
of the time it's like almost like you're retraining everything in your household, like because if the situations of
Mm-hmm.
your household has different rules than the other household, maybe our household was a little bit stricter, we had more rules, where the other household was a little bit more loosey goosey, kind of do whatever you want. It's not as fun at our house, like potentially,
Mm-hmm.
because we've got all these rules,
Yep.
you know
Yeah. Yeah.
So it just made it
Yeah.
like challenging in that situation. And that's where, those strategies would have been really helpful to be like, hey, we're on the same page. This is what we want. These are conversations that we had versus like, when are you going to go say something to him? Like, when are you going to go
Right.
do something? And like, put that on him when it's
Yeah.
more, we're a team together.
Yes. Yes. It's like stepping into like sort of putting aside the myth that we're individuals.
Yeah.
And embracing the idea that really a marriage is about community and partnership, and also understanding that we really need each other.
Yeah.
We really do. Like, we're not designed to be alone. Um, we're social creatures, right? People in solitary confinement like literally go insane because they don't have that social connection. So it really is a basic social need, and it's what we all want deep down, right? We all want to be understood. We all want to be loved and accepted by our spouses. But the only way we do that is by regulating our emotions
Yeah.
first, so
Yeah.
that we can give ourselves the opportunities to do that. And it's really, it's really quite beautiful, because when you actually get into a rhythm with your spouse and start to have these conversations, you just learn more about them, like where they're coming from. And assuming that you love this person at baseline, it just makes you love them even more,
Yeah.
and that's really what true intimacy is. It's understanding all of these layers of our partners,
Yeah.
getting to
Absolutely.
know them better.
Yeah. So that is great for like working with your spouse on these things. But as
Yeah,
a stepmom,
right.
how do you talk about helping and building relationships with your step kids? Because it
Yeah,
can also be
totally.
something very challenging, which I don't think is talked about enough.
Yeah,
That feeling that stepmoms have, and maybe the guilt if you like don't feel like you love your stepchild, or I'm
yeah,
supposed to feel this way, but maybe I don't, or it's harder than I
right.
thought it would be, or there's so many
Yeah,
mixed emotions. So how do you work on like helping stepmoms, like maybe even build that relationship, or having ownership, like, hey girl, it's cool, you don't have to like it, like you don't have to like it.
right.
It's fine to feel
Yeah,
upset or frustrated or angry, all those emotions you were kind of talking about before.
yeah. And that's exactly so. The way that I work with my clients is also in many ways the ways that I show them how to do with their kids as well. So, like, the very first step is kind of like what you were referring to, is we're just going to unshame everything that's going on inside of you. Like, it's normal if you feel like you're having a hard time loving them or even liking them. That's very
Yeah.
normal. It's normal to have resentment. It's normal to feel dread. It's normal to feel anxious, right? So we just unshame all of that, because that's sort of like the first layer, the first thing that's getting in the way of them having that relationship that they're
Yeah.
maybe craving or desiring with this kiddo, right? Because all of those feelings kind of cloud our abilities to have that relationship. And once
Yeah.
we accept them, then they're not a problem anymore. And it's easier for us to just maybe notice them and let them go. Okay. And then we also do that, like, in order to build a better relationship with our stepkids, we also work in the same way. We want to validate and normalize all of their feelings too.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
like, a big one, like you said, is when there's different sets of rules between households, right?
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I feel like, I the women that I speak to, I feel like we all, they must be attracted to, it's like all the same people come to me. It's like our house is stricter, it's less fun, right? So, and that's very common. It's very common to have differences. It is challenging to have differences, but at the same time, kids don't need things to be the same across homes. They just need to know that it's hard and they're going to be okay, right? So we
Yeah.
want to validate all of their feelings. And also then from a parenting standpoint, be a detective for what, like, if we look at the feeling or the behavior rather that they're doing, like if they're not listening or they're hitting their sibling or whatever, if we look at that as a clue to sort of the larger emotional picture that's going on underneath the surface. If we look at maybe unkind words that they say as just a clue to maybe some difficult emotions that they're having underneath the surface,
Hmm.
then we can start to again use some of those same principles of being curious, of seeking to understand where they're coming from, of helping them to think of different strategies for, dealing with their feelings rather than hitting, rather than being not listening, that are more useful, right? So
Hmm.
that we help them understand themselves. We help them think about different ways to, calm their own bodies down, right?
Yeah.
And there's lots of tools that I give my people on how to do that work for kids as
Yeah.
young as 2. Um, but we teach them how to calm their own bodies down instead of, hitting their sibling. We teach them how to, do something that they don't want to do by validating. Like, yeah, it is hard to do something you don't want to do.
Yeah.
I get it.
Right.
And I still need you to do this, right? So we become more like an ally with them when we seek to understand them, when we validate their emotions, when we help them understand themselves.
Mhm. That's beautiful. Like, I
Yeah.
would love to know, because I'm sitting here thinking, if there's moms listening that are like, I have no idea how to be curious and not like
Right.
be crazy or like nagging or like
Mm-hmm.
pushing too much. You know what I mean? Like, because some kids
Yeah.
don't talk. How do you have? I'm just curious. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
how do you teach moms, or like, are there questions or that you teach moms to kind of talk to their kids or their stepkids about? How do you get curious without being like naggy and then forcing too much when then it leads to a fight? That's just kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So I think from like an emotional standpoint, we also have to help ourselves be like not need the
Yeah.
kids to change in order for us to be okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're kind of like um unattached to whether or not they listen to us or take it in or actually change. Um so one is we want to just practice not feeling like we need them to be any different than they are, because we know on the inside that we're good parents no
Okay.
matter how they
So it's
behave,
not a
right?
reflection of us. So like them acting up
Exactly.
and
Their
doing whatever,
behavior.
it's not a reflection to me. Okay.
Exactly. Right. So we help you like depersonalize that
Yeah.
behavior, right? And like a question that I give people to ask themselves when it comes to really any challenging person is, you know, if this wasn't about me, what might it be about here? What else might be going on? Right. So we remove the personalization, we remove the idea that, I'm a bad parent, right? This is my fault. I should be nicer, right? All the judgments, all the criticism. And we broaden the perspective when we ask ourselves what else might be going on here.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, but again, the way to not get sucked into a fight is to actually, tap into empathy,
Mm.
right? And you can get into that by asking yourself what else might be going on here for this child. Like if it doesn't have anything to do with me, what might be going on? And a lot of times people see, for example, like they must, you know, maybe they're just having like a really bad day. Maybe they didn't sleep enough hours, right? Maybe they got in a fight with their friend. Maybe they're feeling guilty, that they like us and their mom doesn't want them to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like maybe they're just crazy because it's a transition day.
Yeah.
So once we know that, we can offer the kids, suggestions, we can offer language, and guess what? If they don't respond to that, then we just let it go,
Mm.
because we know we don't need them to change in order for us to be okay. Okay. So like I think the main message there for moms is just to practice depersonalizing with that question so that you can find empathy for this kiddo, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really what's going to allow you to not get involved in an argument or a power battle or a debate. And guess what? If you find yourself in that situation where you're like really getting heated and like, want to start yelling, or maybe you have yelled, you can like be like, okay, time out. Like I'm going to go, in the other room and take a few deep breaths so that I can calm my body down so that I can, we can really talk about this.
Yeah.
Right. Depending on the age of the kid, of course, right? You might
Right.
use different language, but you're allowed to stop. Like you don't have to, nobody's going to be perfectly like some Zen Buddha all the time, right? You can have an exit strategy and come back. And that's a very healthy strategy. And it also teaches children like this is normal, right? It's normal to get upset. It's normal to take a break. It's normal to come back when we're calmer here.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. So, because yeah, you can use that obviously like with your spouse or anyone, like any discussion that you're in that is getting a little out of
Yes.
control. You can be like, okay, like I need to go like, take a half an hour walk, or I need to end this phone call. Like I would, let me come back to it because I'm feeling a little overworked, or we're not, it's not going in the way that it's not being as productive as I wanted it to be. Um,
Exactly.
you know,
And that is how, like, that is part of the strategy, going back to what we first talked about earlier. That is how people cut their heated fights in half, because, they're showing up calmer. They're using specific language that helps them not be right, that, includes I statements, that focuses on us versus the problem. They're using that language, but then if things do get heated, they have an exit strategy.
mhm.
Because honestly, like, if two people, especially two adults, are defensive with one another, it's like two toddlers, like
Yeah,
in a boxing ring. It's, and it's not like it's real. I'm not trying to put anybody down, but our brains, when we're in that state, our rational minds are literally like offline. It's
yeah,
like they have left the building, and we're fighting with that more like primal part of us. And that's why we end up saying stuff we regret. And that's why, like, we do things that we're, quote unquote, feel ashamed of. But it's really because it's like our inner toddlers, our inner child have come out, and you're never going to get anywhere when you're in that state.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Speaking from experience, right?
That makes total sense. So
Yeah.
is this all the same? It sounds like this is all things that you can use with kids and stepmoms, no matter the age. So like if you have younger kids, so like you said, you can teach them things starting at 2 years old, but moms
Yeah.
that have toddlers versus stepmoms that have like toddlers, and then the
Hmm.
teenagers, and then as they get older and into high school, and then they're out of the house, because even though it's like, oh yeah, well, once they're 18, they're on their own. I feel like the problems are always still there. There's
Yeah.
always still things like, okay, now let's talk about, holidays and how we're going to work that.
Exactly.
So it's something that always is going on. So these are great strategies that you can just use at any point in your life, that maybe you just have to tweak some things like as they get older, or situations are different, or when they're
Yeah.
talking back to you more, or, I'm in the teenager phase right now. So, there's a lot of things that you can kind of work on that go through the test of time, but you might just have to come back and like tweak those conversations because now the child is older, and the situation might
Exactly.
be different.
Yeah. Totally. Right. Like, my daughter, she's like almost 18 months. There's a lot she doesn't understand. Right.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
not a whole lot that I can do, in terms of stopping her from hitting people, right? Other than telling her no, like, we don't hit.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but I can hold her when she's crying and just say, like, oh yeah, it looks like you're so upset, and just let her cry. you
Yeah.
know you're allowed to cry, you're allowed to be upset, mommy's here. Right. And then with my 15-year-old stepson, right, that's going to look very different, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm going to separate you now because you're not being safe with your sibling when you hit her. Right. And then we might have a conversation where he's like, I'm just so frustrated. And I'm like, yeah, you're allowed to be frustrated.
Mhm.
And right, that doesn't mean you have a right to hit your sibling. Right.
Mhm.
So, and he already knows lots of stuff. So I'll be like, what are the tools you have to help with your frustration?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, that's
Like,
awesome.
like, take some deep breaths, right? Even just breathing. Okay. Breathing, going to punch a pillow other than your sister, right? Like, so obviously the older they get, the more nuanced and specific you can be. Um, but that principle, of validating, allowing, setting boundaries
Mhm.
kind of is the core philosophy of the way that I help people to relate to their stepkids, even in those really tough moments.
Yeah. What would you say, or maybe you've already like said it today, but I just
Yeah.
want to ask you, like, what would you say is kind of the number one concern or problem, let's just say, when a stepmom comes to work with you, that is the thing that she's having like the biggest issue with? Is there one thing that kind of really stands out that like pretty much this is like
Such a
what
good
all
question.
stepmoms come to me with? Because I do feel like,
Yeah.
and that's why I wanted to have you on, because I don't feel like
Yeah.
being a stepmom is ever talked about, or like how do we
No.
stepmoms, or how do we have this discussion, or it is really freaking hard, it's so challenging.
Yeah.
I don't like, my brain isn't working I don't know where I'm going. I'm like a robot.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing. So I want to make sure we have this
Yeah.
conversation. So stepmoms know like there is a place for them to go. There is help
Yes.
out there, but like you aren't alone and you are
You
allowed.
are not alone.
Just
Yes.
like you said, to your child, like you're allowed to have these feelings. Like, I just think that's so beautiful to like release that shame,
Yeah.
in motherhood of any kind, but even being a stepmom, because there is no, there's no written rules.
Yeah, exactly. There's no written rules. And the ones like the guidelines that are out there, I think are not helpful for most people. But sort of the biggest problem, I mean, that's a good question because I guess as I'm sitting here and we're having this conversation, what I see the most is and people when they come to me, they don't identify as this, but when I tell them, they're like, oh my God, like that is
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Is people get stuck in a state of like chronic stress
Mhm.
and like chronic fight or flight. And so all they can focus on in their family are the problems,
Yeah.
right? How difficult things are with the stepkids, how challenging the ex is, how their spouse is overly permissive with the kids, right? Doesn't want to enforce the rules. So all they can see are the problems. And I tell them that makes so much sense because when we're in a state of chronic stress or chronic anxiety, like that's how we're designed to think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Those things go hand in hand. Okay. And so that's why the solution is always we have to alleviate that. And then we have to give you the tools to mitigate and release those emotions as they come up so that you can start to um, see that there are good things
Mm-hmm.
and really feel that, right? Really feel like the love from your spouse more often, right? Be able to see, tangible shifts in your dynamics with your spouse because you're conversing in a different way, right? Because you're no longer in a state of chronic stress, right? Being able to enjoy spending time with your stepkids sometimes, right? Maybe not all the time, right? And then showing up as a calmer parent so that you feel good
Yeah.
about the way you're interacting. And you know that no matter what, you have that confidence, like, I am not the one screwing this up here, you know? Because
Yes.
I think,
I want to feel
right?
that way. I want to feel that way.
Yeah, because I think so many people, because there's all these messages, like, first of all, culturally, there's like 4, Disney movies where stepmoms are the murderous villains, right? So there's literal cultural messages, and there has been for centuries that stepmoms are evil, right? So we sort of absorb that when we're kids as little sponges, and we question ourselves, we doubt ourselves in that role, and it makes
Yeah.
sense because of society, right? Because of culturally the influences that we're under. And so a lot of doubt creeps in, a lot of, self-reflection creeps in. Am I doing this right? Am I a bad person? And that leads, right, that turns into, well, this is really difficult and I don't know how to deal with it. And nobody's validating that this is difficult. And I don't know what to do when I feel really alone. And bam, a year later, I'm like stuck in a chronic state of stress.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah, it is. Right. And so again, like I said, people will come to me and they'll be like, I resent my stepkids. I can't stop fighting with my spouse. I have a really poor relationship with my stepdaughter or whatever. My partner's ex is like really aggressive and not good with boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Like they'll come with that, but the problem is really inside how my body has been responding to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can't control those other people, right? Like we're not controlling anybody, but we can first adjust how we feel about these things so that we can actually be more strategic in doing something about them if there is anything to be done.
Yeah. That makes so much sense because it's all about like that mindset and the things that you focus on. More of those things are
Yes.
attracted to you. So if you're focusing on all the negative things, whether it's in your job, whether it's in your marriage, whether it's with your kids, more of those things are going to unintentionally, like you don't even know this or realize it, but like they are going to start happening. So once you can
Yeah.
make those small shifts and realize that, and then look at the things that are positive or the things that you want more of, or those tiny little things like, oh my God, they put one thing in the dishwasher. And even though it was in
Right.
the right place, and I might go
They
move
did
it
it.
later, they
Right.
still did it. they did do
Yes.
it. That's a
Yes,
win.
they did do it. Yeah. So one of the, I mean, and this is maybe for your, for anybody who wants to tap more into that. Like one of the things I love asking people about their spouses is like, how do they show me the love
Yeah.
already? Like, what are the small ways that they do it? Or what's good about my marriage already? Because when we focus on like, if I think about my own marriage, um, I love the way that my husband always like stocks up our cabinet, like we're some preppers or something, right? But we always
Okay.
have we always have like, pasta sauce or pasta noodles or tuna fish. Like it's always there, right? I love that.
All the
And I love
staples.
that, like, right, all the staples. He stocks all the staples, right? And I love that if I say something like, "Oh, I'm out of ibuprofen," like a few days later, a bottle will just appear on my desk, right?
Magic.
So like when I think about that, I feel really seen and really loved.
Yeah.
Right. And so for everybody here who's maybe like really down right now in your life or your marriage, whatever, as a stepmom, even if you're not a stepmom, right?
Yeah.
This can apply universally. What is good right now, right? About my marriage? How do I know my partner loves me? What are the small ways they love me? Right. And then you can turn that towards your stepkids. Like, what's one small thing that I like about them? Right? Like if I think about for me, I love the way like how my eldest stepson is so loving towards my daughter, right? His baby sister, right?
Mhm.
I really appreciate that. It's really beautiful to see, their relationship, right? It's a small thing, but it matters,
Yeah.
right? So we can even help ourselves to quote unquote see those good things just by asking that simple question.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting. I don't know if you notice it or not, and you probably do this in your coaching, that you change your voice and like your cadence and like the sound of
Mm-hmm.
your voice. Like I'm sure
Yes.
it's unintentional but intentional at the same time.
Yes.
But I just notice it. I'm like, oh, you're just so soft and warm and cozy right now.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's funny that you said that because I am trained in conversational hypnosis, which means that initially I learned that, that the way that we speak to our conscious and unconscious minds is different. And now I guess I just do it automatically. So,
I noticed it. Good job. Good job. But it is, and I noticed that with a lot of like coaches, different
yeah.
coaches and stuff like that, like changing your voice
Yeah.
and calming your voice and
Yeah.
slowing your cadence and
Yeah.
all
Well,
that.
there's
So
science behind that, right? Like and some people may not even realize they're doing it, but it's linked to science because most of our stuff is actually dictated by our unconscious mind.
mhm. Yeah. Oh, I love it. I noticed. So good job. All
Yeah.
right. So we could probably keep talking for hours because I'm like, oh crap, we're good. We're
Yeah,
getting
yeah, yeah, right?
late here. So is there
Mhm.
anything you have shared so much, Kristen, but is there anything
Yes.
that you still feel like is on your heart or maybe that you haven't touched on or touched about enough or just want to get that message out to, the mamas and the stepmamas that are listening right now?
Yes. Yeah, mom or stepmom, I just want to offer to you that whatever it is that you're dealing with, like if you're having a hard time right now, I do want to let you know that it's normal
Mhm.
and you really are not alone. And there are so many platforms and people now that can support you in that. So you don't have to keep feeling alone. You don't have to keep feeling like things are really hard. So, that message is one of hope,
Yeah.
truly.
Well, I love that. Oh, yeah, it's so true. And that's, the whole point of this podcast, the whole point of the summit, like everything is to be like, you aren't alone.
Hmm.
Like we're in this together, even if we're in different situations or what I'm farther along in my journey because I have older kids than you, like we
Right.
got you. Like we're here together. Like I'm having a hard
Yes,
time, you're helping me. You're having a hard time, I'm helping you. Like we are in this together. But it can feel very lonely and you can go down
hmm,
that rabbit hole if you allow yourself to. And sometimes you do. And then there's always somebody there to help you out, when you're ready. So I love that message. I love that message
exactly.
of hope. Thank you.
Yes.
So how can people find you? And I'll share, your information in the show notes,
Yeah.
but what would be the best way if someone wanted to contact you to be like, okay, I need some help with my emotional regulation and all these conversations and getting out of
Yes.
that stress cycle?
Yes, yes, totally. So I would say first, check out my Instagram. It's at the.stepmom.coach. And I know it'll be linked in the notes here, but I actually give you an introduction to some of these tools that I've talked about, right? To help you regulate your emotions if you want to, right? I also give a lot of simple scripts on there, right? So come check out all that free stuff. And then you can also just DM me directly on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, facebook.com/coaching with Kristin. You can come check me out there, come DM me there as well. But basically, there's lots of really amazing free stuff that you can actually start using right away, right? Sort of test it out by yourself and notice how you feel, right? You can
Yeah.
start like enjoying some of these benefits that we've talked about here just by visiting either of those pages.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I almost forgot like the one question that I ask everyone. I almost forgot it because I was so into this
Right.
conversation and so present. What would I have done if I forgot it? Okay, but I didn't.
Oh my gosh.
That's the
Okay.
important thing. Okay, so we've talked about some things, but I always love to ask every single one that comes on, just because we tend to not, root for ourselves enough, cheer for ourselves enough,
Hmm.
recognize those things that we are doing. Like we'll recognize in others and our kids and our stepkids and our spouse, but we might not recognize it in ourselves. So I would love to know, what is something that you love about yourself right now?
Mm,
Take it
a
away.
beautiful question. I love it. I love it. So I guess really what's coming up for me is I love that have become such a strong and resilient person who is willing to be this voice for other women, whose shoes I have been in, essentially,
Yeah.
right? Because it takes a lot of self-confidence to say the uncomfortable thing. Like it's okay for you to dread your stepkids,
Mhm.
right? That's not a popular message in some circles, right? But I'm out here doing it because I really believe it's true. And I believe that so many people are suffering unnecessarily,
Yeah.
and I'm showing up every single day, basically sharing some version of that same message. Like
Mhm.
you are okay. And also, if you want things to change, you are not eternally screwed to feel this way forever or to keep having tons and tons of fights, right? And that has really also translated, right? Like what I preach is what I do
Yeah.
in my home, right? And you guys will see this if you come check me out on my pages. Like I literally share like screenshots of, arguments I've had with my husband to show people how I use these tools, you know? And I'm not even like, honestly, I'm not even like thinking about it beforehand. I'm just like, oh, this is actually a really good example of what I'm talking about, right? So I share lots of really personal things because I believe so deeply in this work and I really do, walk the talk. And it's not perfect, right? If I don't want anybody to listen to this being like, oh, she's like perfect, she's got it all figured out. No, I'm just a human being embracing my humanness and helping other humans connect to what we all want deep down, which is to feel seen and loved and, connected to
Yeah.
one another.
Oh, I love that. I'm so glad I did not forget to ask you that question. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
I know. I love the question.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you, Kristin, being on here today. And I know that the
Yes.
mamas and stepmamas that are listening are just going to go find you and follow you on Instagram because you put a lot of good stuff and reels out there. So make sure you go
Yes.
follow. And thank you so much for being here today and sharing so much of your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Melissa. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.